In a dark world full of secrets, there is something waiting, something you cannot escape. Do you have the courage to face the darkness? The sky was ominously dark, and the wind swept across the sand dunes, howling with unknown voices. Crawford, who had emerged from the depths of the cursed tomb, was running aimlessly. His breath was ragged, and his hands trembled violently. He knew something was chasing him, something that did not belong to this world. The sounds he had heard inside still buzzed in his head, but they now seemed closer and more distinct, as if they were speaking directly to his mind. When he looked around, he saw the sand shifting as if it were a dark sea boiling with unknown creatures. He realized he had to reach his tent, where he could at least secure himself temporarily. After what felt like hours of fleeing, Crawford finally reached his battered tent, barely standing amidst the sands. He rushed inside and sealed the entrance with a small metal chest that was nearby. The next morning, the sun rose with a reddish-orange glow, but Crawford felt no warmth from its rays. His eyes were sunken in shadow, and the whispers and hisses that had filled his head since leaving the tomb did not fade. His body bore wounds, but what hurt him more was the memory of what he had seen and heard in those accursed, dark chambers. Crawford realized that the Black Scarab had awakened. The night before, while attempting to sleep in his rickety tent, strange sounds began creeping through the sands. At first, they were incomprehensible whispers, but they soon transformed into terrifying screams coming from all directions. Crawford tried to ignore them, but suddenly, he felt something crawling on his body. He lit the flickering lamp and found the sand beneath him moving as if alive, teeming with small scarabs seeping through the cracks. They crawled with terrifying speed, emitting sounds akin to deadly clicking. He tried to escape but discovered that the scarabs were gathering to form distorted human shapes. These figures stared at him with empty eyes, but they bled black blood. When he attempted to approach one to drive it away, it disintegrated into dust, leaving behind a mocking laughter that pierced his ears. Crawford did not sleep the entire night. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw horrifying creatures dragging him into an infinite darkness. He saw the faces of his friends who had been lost in the tomb, mutilated and their bodies riddled with wounds, screaming his name and begging for salvation. What terrified him most was seeing himself in the nightmares, surrounded by massive scarabs wrapping around his body and pulling him into the depths of the earth. When he opened his eyes to the daylight, he found his hand extended to the sand, as if instinctively digging. But he wasn't just digging into the sand. He noticed deep marks on his skin, as though some unseen force had been etching strange symbols onto him while he slept. While trying to clean himself of dust and blood, Crawford felt something moving inside his mind. The strange words he had read in the book came back to him, but this time in a deep and terrifying voice. With each repetition of the voice in his head, he felt as though his skull would burst. Looking around, he saw strange footprints in the sand surrounding his tent, but they weren't human. They were deep and filled with mysterious symbols, as if they were runes carved by unnatural feet. He felt something watching him from afar, but when he tried to focus on the horizon, he saw a massive shadow-covered being moving slowly toward the tomb, leaving a trail of black fire in its wake. As the sun rose higher, Crawford's eyes remained engulfed in shadow, and his head still echoed with the hisses and voices that had haunted him since that moment in the tomb. His body bore wounds, but what pained him more was what he had witnessed, heard, and endured in those dark, cursed chambers. The Black Scarab had awakened. Crawford understood that the curse had begun to manifest. Crawford felt utterly lost. His mind was clouded, and madness began knocking at the doors of his sanity. Was what happened to him real? Were the creatures he had seen truly there? Or was his fear so overwhelming that it painted everything with a horrifying hue? Yet one thing was certain in his mind. The curse the book had warned of was regaining its strength. Something dark lurked within the shadows, growing stronger with each passing moment. What made it even more terrifying was that, in his dreams, these monstrous beings were relentlessly chasing him, seeping through walls and sand, destroying everything in their path. But the worst part was when he felt something strange moving inside his mind. His vision blurred into reality, and he felt an invisible force compelling him to search for something mysterious buried deep within the desert. Crawford realized he would not survive unless he found a way to stop the Black Scarab. Determined, he decided to return to the tomb. He now understood that the book was not merely a source of information. It was the key to the curse itself. He realized that the book did not just contain ancient spells. It was a bridge between our world and the realm of the Black Scarab's creatures. There was more than just myth in that book, and he had to uncover it before the entire world was consumed. He returned to the place where his team had vanished. The sands had once again sealed the entrance, as if the tomb had swallowed them both. The desert was unnaturally silent, as though it awaited a catastrophic event. Crawford stepped forward and began digging in the ground, his eyes fixated on the sand, which resembled a frozen sea. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet trembled, and a faint, unsettling whisper began to break the stillness. When his hands dug deeper, he felt something hard beneath the sand. As he cleared it away, he uncovered the old entrance. Crawford descended into the tomb, where shadows crept slowly through the darkened chambers. The beams from his flickering lamp trembled unnaturally. Within the rooms, the symbols on the walls began to glow once more, and the closer he got to them, the colder his hands became. At first, he thought the book was the key, but what he discovered was far more terrifying. As he entered the central chamber, an unnatural energy filled the air. The ground was distorted and covered with tangled black ink-like lines, as if the creatures had carved the earth itself. In the far corner of the room, Crawford saw something more horrifying than he could have imagined. A large mummy holding what appeared to be the Black Scarab. Its eyes were deformed, and its face bore the marks of devastation, as though it carried a dark past. It was clear that the Black Scarab was not just a symbol or statue. It was a real being, trapped in an ancient body, its life frozen through the ages. But what truly froze Crawford's heart was when he realized the scarab was watching him and moving. Suddenly, a deep voice emerged from the surrounding shadows. "You have returned. but you cannot escape. Enormous creatures resembling scarabs began moving rapidly through the darkness. There was no time to flee. The air was thick with the stench of death and decay. The Black Scarab appeared suddenly, its faint glow emanating from its body, devouring everything in its path. Creatures emerged from the walls themselves, encircling Crawford and crawling toward him, their eyes gleaming with bloodlust. In an instant, the tomb turned into a living nightmare. Everything moved unnaturally, and Crawford was trapped as the creatures drew closer and closer. The sound emanating from the scarab was worse than anything, whispers and screams echoing from the depths of darkness, as though the sound itself was resurrecting the dead creatures. Then, in a moment of ultimate horror, the ground beneath his feet erupted, revealing a massive dark gateway that emitted a black, ember-like light. It was the portal that had been sealed for thousands of years, now reopening to bring an ancient scarab back to life. As Crawford neared the portal, he felt a massive, black hand emerging from it, wrapping around his body and pulling him in. He knew it was too late, but in his final moments, his hand grasped the cursed book he still carried, tears of despair streaming down his face. In that instant, he felt something breaking inside his mind, as though the universe itself was collapsing. In his last breath, he screamed at the top of his lungs, "Do not let this book escape!"